Start surfing responsibly with StartPage, the world's most private search engine.
The race has begun, fellow freedom fighters, and the Republican establishment is already working to exclude Congressman Ron Paul and his message of limited government, sound monetary policy, and non-interventionist foreign policy. If you've been around since late 2006, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If not, you're about to get a brief lesson in dirty tricks. During the 2008 presidential campaign, the media mockingbirds at Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC worked hand in hand with the political establishment to try to marginalize and exclude Ron Paul at every turn. Internal petitions were circulated within the Republican Party to get Dr. Paul off the presidential ticket. Corporate-controlled media purposely reduced the number of chairs at debates to keep him off the stage, and the media spin masters labeled their favored candidates as top tier to influence the masses like a bad high school student council election where only the self-absorbed popular girl wins. At the recent Southern Republican Leadership Conference, 60 to 70 Ron Paul supporters with prepaid tickets were given the runaround and held off from registering to attend for over 2.5 hours. Tony Blackman was there and documented the attempted exclusion.
Now, you're telling us that we can't register now that's past 1, but the thing is, we were here at 12:30.
That's a 10-hour drive. I don't understand what the situation is. I mean, we paid for it in advance.
Registration has been set as closing at 1. Other than that, there's no further information we can give you at this time.
Southern Republic Leadership Conference website, where it says right here, Saturday, April 10th, 8 to 1.
People, we all started to kind of walk towards it. She's like, don't worry, it's only going to be temporarily closed.
Oh, okay.
So they could rearrange the ballot, probably.
Okay.
In a phone interview with me yesterday, Tony concluded that I truly believe there was a definite attempt to shut down registration prematurely for not only my wife and myself, but some 60 to 70 Ron Paul supporters, some of whom were elderly and had traveled a great distance. Only after much persistence, the crowd standing together for 2.5 hours of waiting, were we finally allowed in to vote and attend the speeches. Luckily, most of us walked into the ballroom just as Ron Paul was being introduced. Now, I personally believe these are early attempts to exclude the congressman and are designed to discourage the congressman from running in 2012. However, they underestimate the resolve of the core Ron Paul supporter and forget that these attempts only make us work harder. It's time for the Reality Report. All right, welcome back to the Reality Report. Let's go to Nina Police in the newsroom for today's headlines. Nina?
Thanks, Gary. It is no secret that the mainstream media fears Ron Paul. Just a few weeks ago, we showed how Paul was repeatedly mocked by Fox News during the 2008 Republican presidential debates. Any mention of him on network television is immediately met with marginalization. CBS decided to join the attack Sunday following the Southern Republican Leadership Conference, which took place this past weekend in New Orleans. In a straw poll gauging who attendees would vote for in the 2012 election, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney won the poll, edging Paul by just 1 vote. The mainstream media immediately recognized Romney's win, stating that he beat Sarah Palin and not Ron Paul, as a sign that he is a front-runner for the 2012 Republican nod. And when Paul won the CPAC straw poll earlier this year, CBS News wrote, "Fewer than a quarter of the 10,000 attendees participated in the balloting, an unscientific sampling that only offers bragging rights." Sunday, just 1 day after Romney's 1-vote victory over Paul at the SRLC straw poll, CBS News reported, Mitt Romney won the straw poll at the Southern Republican Leadership Conference here Saturday at a victory that will be taken as a sign of the former Massachusetts governor's strength as a 2012 presidential candidate. Now, how is the SRLC any more legitimate than CPAC? And you wonder why people aren't reading newspapers, turning off cable television, and turning to online media outlets as their source for real news. And as part of the last year's AIG bailout, the Federal Reserve spent more than $70 billion of taxpayer money on failing property. Now they're losing even more money as they attempt to sell out the fledgling property. Because of the bailout, the Fed now owns loans to struggling hotels, airports, and even malls. This means if they can't sell the loans or property at a fair rate, less money travels back to the Treasury. You can't be surprised that the federal government made a bad investment, charged taxpayers, and will now put a larger burden on the American people as the bailout fails. We will keep you updated as specific details continue to be exposed about the bailout. And now it's time for this week's StartPage.com privacy headline. Last week, Parliament in the United Kingdom passed the Digital Economy Bill, giving British government powerful new authority to control and limit residents' access to the internet. The bill allows the government to censor or totally block websites that are, quote, likely used for or in connection with an activity that infringes on copyright. If you are alleged to have download copyright material, government has the authority to disconnect your internet connection at any time. The bill was rushed through Parliament, getting the nod of approval after only 2 hours of debate. This is clearly a violation of civil liberties, and American residents should be prepared for similar lobbying in Washington. These are today's headlines. I'm Nina Police. Gary?
Thank you, Nina. Earlier this week, we caught up with Iraq War veteran Adam Kokesh to discuss his congressional run in New Mexico and the recent attempted exclusion of Ron Paul supporters at the Southern Republican Leadership Conference.
Let's start looking at the powers of the Fed. They have a mandate to maintain full employment. Well, how are they doing on that? They have a mandate to oversee financial institutions, and I think they're really failing on that too. But let's look at the legislation. Let's look at things we can do to rein in their power. Section 13-3, specifically of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, is the one that Ben Bernanke has invoked to conduct these bank bailouts in secret. No one is for that part of it.
We also had a chance to speak with Michael Badnarik, the president of the Continental Congress, regarding the April 19th National Action Day to present the Articles of Freedom to state houses and congressional offices nationwide.
I agree that the federal government has gotten so corrupt and so big that they're just stuck with all this hubris. They are eventually going to collapse under their own weight of corruption. As you indicated, many of the state legislatures are eager to get the Articles of Freedom because they want to know what the people think. And the state legislatures are, in many cases, trying to defend themselves against federal government encroachment.
Remember, you can watch both of the interviews in their entirety by visiting realityreport.tv or by clicking the link in the show description. Now it's time for the picture of the week. That's right, corporate-controlled news media. We couldn't control the people without you. Gotta love it, huh? Folks, we can't do this show without your support. Please show us that you care and pledge $10 by texting RTR space 10 to 95495. Now it's time for my favorite part of the show, where we take a look at the mailbag. Our first email states that I've been following Patrick Wood in the August Review since 2005. He really knows his stuff. Well, that's why we teamed up with a 30-year veteran Trilateral Commission hunter so we could help educate Americans to one of the groups responsible for pulling the strings behind closed doors. If you're not sure who Patrick Wood is, please check the show archives at realityreport.tv. And finally, Steve in Canada writes, I support your cause because what happens in America will ultimately make its way up to the Great White North as well as the rest of the world. Here's to a new world without their order. Well, we love our neighbors to the north, and it's true that globalism, as it relates to destroying national sovereignty in exchange to give a few elites at the top more money and power, is a threat to sovereign nations worldwide. Just as they are coming together to form a new world order, it is up to the people to come together within their own countries to fight it by reinforcing national sovereignty. Do you want to send us some show feedback that could get read on the air? Send an email to feedback@freedom.tv. Include your name and town and whatever you feel, because it just may end up on the show. And remember, you can also find us on Facebook. Now, who's this week's enemy of the state? The posthumous enemy of the state goes to Arthur Schlesinger Jr., who said, "We are not going to achieve a new world order without paying for it in blood as well as in words and money." He said that in Foreign Affairs Journal 1995, which is the Council on Foreign Relations publication. Now, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Reality Report. Please support the message of the independent media by forwarding this video to your friends, family, and coworkers, and remember to follow us on Twitter. I'm Gary Franchi, and remember, I am not here to make you a follower. I'm here to make you a leader among the people. Good night.